Some families don't destroy each other with fists or weapons. They do it with a few taps on a screen. A man in his early 30s works non-stop to build a future for his child. And in a single night, every account gets wiped out by his own brother, the same brother who takes the trust, vanishes with his girlfriend, and leaves a father standing in shame, fear, and one brutal question: how does he keep a roof over his kid's head tomorrow? People love to say blood is blood. But there's another truth everyone knows: the deepest damage often comes from the person you let closest. So when family turns into a threat, what's the right move? Stay quiet to protect the family name, or cut the cord to protect the child who's depending on you? Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Now, let's listen to him from the heart. My name is Keaton Vale. I'm 32 and I make a living cleaning up other people's worst days. I'm the guy companies call when something breaks at 2 a.m., when an account gets hijacked, when a system gets hit, when a quiet Tuesday turns into a fire alarm. That night in Minneapolis wasn't supposed to be anything more than late work and stale coffee. It was midweek, the kind of night where the city feels like it's holding its breath. I was at my kitchen table with my laptop open, blue light staining everything. It touched the rim of my coffee mug. The paperwork I'd been meaning to file, the empty cereal bowls sitting in the sink like a reminder that life keeps happening, even when you're exhausted. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle hum of the fridge and the soft tick of the heating vent cycling on and off. I was finishing a report, the last push of a long day. I kept telling myself 10 more minutes, then bed. 10 more minutes, then I could shut my brain down and let my shoulders unclench. Then my phone started vibrating like it was possessed. At first it was one buzz, then another, then a staccato rhythm that didn't make sense, too many alerts, too fast, too urgent. I glanced at the screen and saw the first bank notification: transfer initiated. Then another low balance warning, another new login detected. My hands went cold before my brain even caught up. In my line of work, patterns matter. Alerts stack for a reason. When they come in a burst like that, it's never a harmless glitch. It's movement. It's a breach. It's someone inside the perimeter. I snatched my phone and opened the banking app, expecting to see an error or a delayed posting. I told myself it had to be some weird system hiccup, a delayed batch, a notification storm. The numbers proved me wrong in one breath. My checking account, the account that paid rent and groceries, was almost at zero. My savings gone. The emergency fund I'd built brick by brick after years of scraping gone. And then I tapped the little tab labeled with the name I hated looking at because it made me feel soft poppy. The tiny college nest egg I'd started for my daughter when she was still small enough to sleep on my chest. That balance was wiped clean too. For a second I didn't move. I didn't blink. My eyes just tracked the screen as if staring harder could rewind the transactions. Transfer after transfer. Amounts that weren't random. They were smart. They were prioritized. Whoever did it knew where the money was. They didn't waste time testing a small account first. They went straight for the veins. I swallowed and tried to breathe, but the air felt thick like it was resisting me. I tapped through the transaction details and my mind, my professional mind, snapped into a familiar place. Threat model. Attack surface. Entry point. Authorization trail. Where did they come in? How did they authenticate? Was this credential stuffing? A compromised email. A token that never expired. My fingers moved fast. Too fast for how stunned I was. Then I saw something that made my stomach flip. The app showed the device used for the transfers. Not just an IP or a vague identifier, an actual device name. A trusted device. A device that had been linked long enough that the bank didn't treat it like a stranger knocking on the door. An old Android, a cheap one. And it wasn't labeled unknown or new device. It was labeled with a name I recognized so instantly my body reacted like I'd been slapped. Rhett, my brother. The same brother I once pulled out of a hole when he couldn't make rent. The same brother I defended in front of our mother when he screwed up again. The same brother I had trusted enough stupidly, warmly, blindly to leave as an authorized user when he was just trying to get back on his feet. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. My first instinct was denial. That had to be old. That had to be something left over from years ago, something I'd forgotten about, a phantom device name the system never cleared. But denial doesn't hold up against timestamps. The login alert matched the time the transfers started, minutes apart, like a coordinated punch. I clicked into the device list again, hoping I was wrong, hoping there was another explanation. The app showed it plainly: trusted device, verified previously. No extra verification required. I had handed him the key. I had taped it under the welcome mat and told myself it was loyalty. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not panic exactly, more like a hard expanding pressure, like my heart was trying to push out of my ribs because it couldn't handle staying inside my body. A memory flashed sharp and unwanted me a few years back, newly on my own with Poppy, drowning in bills and exhaustion. Rent-due credit cards, maxed late fees stacking like bricks. Rhett had shown up with that grin he used when he wanted to feel like a hero. He'd thrown a small wad of cash onto my counter like it was nothing, told me to stop stressing. Told me family took care of family. That night, when I added him as an authorized user on one card just in case, just as a safety net, I'd convinced myself I was repaying that moment. Gratitude encoded into access. I never removed him when things got better. I kept him there like a scar I didn't want to heal because it reminded me I wasn't alone. Now that scar was a blade. I hit the call button. It rang. Once. Twice. Straight to voicemail. I hung up and tried again, like the extra attempt could change the outcome. Like maybe the phone would suddenly connect and he'd pick up and laugh and tell me it was all a mistake. Voicemail. My thumb hovered over his contact photo, an old picture from before he started looking tired all the time. Before he started making jokes that weren't really jokes. I texted him, "What did you do?" Delivered. No reply. I stared at the word delivered like it was mocking me. Like the phone itself was saying he got it. He saw it. He just doesn't care. I went back to the transaction list, my mind refusing to accept a simple betrayal without proof. The transfers weren't one big sweep. They were split into chunks. Smaller amounts going to multiple destinations, then rolling forward again. That wasn't the behavior of someone who panicked and grabbed what they could. That was planning. That was someone who'd rehearsed this. Someone who'd decided he wasn't borrowing. He was erasing. My hands started shaking, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I did. Rent for the month lived in that checking account. The auto pay for Poppy's school stuff. The buffer that kept us safe when the car needed repairs or when groceries cost more than they should. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I froze in place like my body was trying to become furniture, trying to avoid drawing attention to itself. In the silence of my apartment, the blue light from my laptop felt suddenly cruel. The empty cereal bowls in the sink felt like an accusation. You promised stability. You promised safety. I'd spent years teaching companies a hard truth: the worst threats are the ones inside the system. The ones you trust. The ones you don't watch closely because you can't imagine them turning on you. I'd always said it like it was business. Now it was personal. And the thought that kept snapping through my head wasn't, how could he? It was, how could I be this careless? I was still staring at the screen, still watching the drained balances like they might refill if I waited long enough, when I heard the soft shuffle of socked feet behind me. A chair scraped lightly somewhere in the hallway. I turned. Poppy stood in the doorway, small and sleepy, her hair a messy halo, unicorn pajamas bunched at her wrists. She rubbed her eyes and took one look at my face. Kids don't need a bank statement to understand when something is wrong. They read the air. They read the way a room feels. Her gaze dropped to my phone, to the red warnings and the ugly numbers. For a second, she didn't say anything. She just stared like she was doing math in her head that didn't involve digits. Then she lifted her chin like she was putting on armor that didn't match her pajamas and said, steady as a grown-up, "Dad, don't worry. I handled it." My brain short-circuited. A 10-year-old can't handle a financial ambush. A 10-year-old can't fix a theft. A 10-year-old shouldn't even have to know words like fraud or account hold. And yet the way she said it, like she wasn't guessing, like she wasn't trying to comfort me, made my heart drop into my stomach. Because it sounded like something that had already happened. something I had missed. The second those words left her mouth, my mind split into two competing instincts. The first was pure dad protect her. Hide the screen. Tell her it's fine. Make her go back to bed and keep childhood intact for as long as I possibly could. The second was the part of me that spends his days inside incident reports and breaches. What did you touch, and what did you change? I forced my face into something calm and scooted my phone closer to me, angling it away like I could shield her from numbers. What do you mean you handled it? I asked, keeping my voice low, careful. Poppy, what did you do? She didn't look scared. She didn't look guilty. She looked focused, like she was explaining homework. She walked over and climbed into the chair beside me, swinging her legs as if this was just another late night at the kitchen table, not the moment our life got knocked sideways. You remember when you showed me the bank app, she said. I blinked. Yeah. You said if anything ever looked weird, I should hit the little flag thing and tell you right away, she continued like she was reciting a rule. You said sometimes bad guys don't wear masks. Sometimes they just use phones. The fact that she remembered that something I'd said months ago casually, the way parents drop advice like breadcrumbs, made my throat tighten. I was on your phone earlier, she went on playing that puzzle game. And then I saw a text from the bank. It said there was a new login. My skin prickled. I opened the app, she said, and the numbers were moving, Dad. Like, down. Fast. She made a little motion with her hand, like watching something slide off a table. It felt sketchy. She looked at me with a kind of fierce seriousness that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. So I hit the emergency freeze button, she said. And I reported the device. For a second, the room tilted. My eyes snapped back to the top of the app. In my panic, in the first blast of adrenaline, I hadn't truly processed the small banner sitting there like a quiet miracle. Temporary hold applied. Suspicious activity under review. My breath caught. I leaned in closer as if I didn't trust what I was seeing. You? Froze the accounts, I said, and I hated how thin my voice sounded. Poppy nodded like she couldn't believe I was asking. Yeah, because you told me. You said if something feels wrong, don't be polite. Hit the red button. I scrolled the transaction list with trembling fingers. Most of the transfers were marked as completed. Too many, too much. A part of me ached so hard I felt it in my teeth. But near the bottom, near the end, there it was. A final transfer, initiated but not cleared. Pending. In limbo. Rhett had nearly gotten everything. Nearly. My daughter had slammed the digital door on his hands. Relief hit me so fast it made me dizzy. It was the kind of relief that tastes like shame because it arrives wearing the face of a child. I'm the professional. I'm the one people pay to protect entire networks. And I hadn't been the fastest person in my own home. How did you know it was him? I asked, even though part of me already knew. I could feel the shape of the answer in the way her eyes flicked toward her tablet. Poppy reached under her hoodie and pulled it out like she'd been waiting for the question. Because of Find My, she said. I frowned. Find My, she tapped the screen a few times and turned it toward me. On the map were dots, little circles that represented people who mattered. Mine, hers, and one more. Remember when we went to that festival by the river last summer, she asked. You made me share my location with you, and you shared yours with me. And Uncle Rhett was there, so you added him too because you said it was safer. I remembered. Of course I remembered. I'd been paranoid about crowds. I'd been the careful dad, the cybersecurity guy who thinks about worst-case scenarios. I hadn't thought about this scenario. You never turned his off, she said simply. The dot labeled Rhett was blinking in a spot north and east, nowhere near Minneapolis, a motel icon near Duluth. My stomach clenched. When the bank text popped up, Poppy continued, I checked the map. His dot was there. You weren't. So I knew something was wrong, and I don't know. It felt like someone was doing something bad. She shrugged like basic geolocation was just a normal part of being 10 now. For a beat, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the map at the dot that represented my brother. My brother sitting in a motel room while my accounts drained like a bathtub with the plug pulled. My anger, which had been wild and shapeless, sharpened into something bright and clean. He hadn't just violated my trust. He'd done it knowing there was a kid sleeping down the hall who depended on me. And I could already hear his old excuses in my head like a haunting, "I'll pay you back. I just need a little time. It's not a big deal. We're family." Family. I looked at Poppy, and the word felt different now, heavy in the wrong way. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked quieter. The bravery on her face flickered for a second, and underneath it I saw the child. "I don't care about stuff," she said, almost tripping over the word. Are we going to have to move?" That question cut deeper than any missing balance. I pulled her into my arms and held her tight, feeling her small body warm against my chest. I wanted to promise her the world. I wanted to make it simple. But what I owed her more than comfort was truth shaped into safety. "We're going to be okay," I said, forcing the words to sound like a plan and not a prayer. "He tried to take everything. But you stopped him from getting all of it." She didn't smile, but she relaxed just a fraction. "And now," I added, and I could feel my own voice hardening, "Dad's going to handle the rest." I released her gently and turned back to the screen. My mind was already building a checklist like I was at work: revoke access, lock down devices, document everything, contact fraud, preserve evidence, check credit, freeze credit if needed, change passwords everywhere, audit every linked account, treat it like an incident because it was. Poppy stayed close, leaning her shoulder against mine like she wanted to be near the control center even if she didn't understand every part of it. I glanced at her and said, "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." She looked up. "So, Uncle Red is the bad guy." The way she said it wasn't dramatic. It was factual. Like she was sorting the world into categories and trying to decide where he belonged. I swallowed. "Uncle Red is someone who made a really terrible choice," I said carefully. "And choices have consequences." She stared at the map again, at that blinking dot, and I watched her mind work in silence. My phone chimed with an email from the bank's fraud department, and my pulse jumped. "Transfer under review. Recipient temporarily restricted." I read it twice to make sure. The pending transfer hadn't just paused on my side. The pipeline on the other end was being squeezed too. Whoever Red had been trying to move that money to whatever account he was counting on was now flagged, restricted, investigated. I felt the cold edge of realization slide under my ribs. If Rhett was desperate enough to clean out my life in one night, he wasn't doing it for fun. He was doing it because he needed that money somewhere else. For someone else. Or because someone was pressuring him and he thought stealing from me was the easiest way out. And now because my 10-year-old daughter had hit the red button that someone else wasn't going to get what they were expecting. I kissed the top of Poppy's head, lingering there for a second longer than usual, breathing in the scent of her shampoo like it could anchor me. Then I looked at the email again, and the last line felt like a warning disguised as customer service. Recipient temporarily restricted. Translation: Rhett's escape route just got narrower. And if he was connected to people who don't like delays, the next thing he'd do wouldn't be to apologize. It would be to panic. It would be to reach for the one tool he'd always used when he wanted something from me. His voice, his pressure, his ability to make me feel guilty for protecting myself. I stared at my phone in the quiet kitchen, the city outside still sleeping, and wondered the one question that made my skin crawl. What does a desperate man do when the money he promised someone doesn't arrive on time? Because if Rhett had been working with anyone, they weren't going to shrug and walk away. They were going to come looking for the person who slammed the door. And whether he meant to or not, my daughter had just done exactly that. Cecilia's phone call kept going in the front seat, her voice low and precise, while the city slid past my window like it had nothing to do with us. Junie leaned into my side, her breath warm through her scarf. I watched the tiny rise and fall of her shoulders and tried to hold on to that rhythm because my own felt like it was breaking apart. "Who has the keys?" Cecilia repeated, the calm in her tone so controlled it was almost frightening. "Who is occupying the property? And where have payments been going?" Payments. That word lodged in my chest like a hook. I wanted to ask 100 questions. I wanted to demand answers. But my mind kept snagging on the same thing over and over Hawthorne Street. A house. My house. A sentence that didn't fit in my life, like someone had dropped a luxury item into a survival kit and expected it to make sense. Junie shifted sleepy in a way kids get when their world changes too fast. She pressed her cheek against my coat and whispered, "Are we in trouble?" "No." I said too quickly because that's what parents do when they're terrified. "No, baby. We're okay." Cecilia ended the call with a soft tap, then drove. No speech, no pity. Just a straight line toward whatever truth she was about to rip out of the ground. But my body didn't live in straight lines anymore. My body lived in the last 6 months, each day stacked on the next like bricks, heavy, stupid, relentless. The way we'd ended up at St. Alowan hadn't been one dramatic fall. It had been pressure, slow, constant, like someone's hand on the back of your neck pushing you down an inch at a time until you realized you couldn't breathe. 6 months earlier, I still believed I was holding it together. I was working as a patient care tech at St. Bridget Medical Center, 12-hour shifts that turned into 14 when someone called out. Call lights went off like slot machines. People asked for water blankets, answers miracles. I gave what I could. I moved bodies that couldn't move themselves. I cleaned messes people were ashamed of. I held hands in quiet rooms where the TV was too loud and the fear was louder. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't reckless. I was tired in the way that feels permanent. Junie was in kindergarten then, still learning the rhythm of school, new friends, new rules, the magic of being praised for coloring inside lines. I packed her lunch at night because mornings were chaos. I wrote little notes on napkins because I wanted her to feel seen even when I was gone before sunrise. For a while that was enough. Hard, but enough. Then rent jumped. Not by a little. By the kind of number that laughs at your budget. My savings, what little I had already been chewed up by car repairs, medical copays, life. And when I ran the math a 4th time, and it still didn't work, I did what people do when they're backed into a corner. I went to my parents. Marla and Gordon Carrick lived in a tidy apartment across town, the kind of place that always smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and control. When I told them I might need help for a little while, Marla's face softened into something that looked like concern. "Family supports. Family," she said, reaching for Junie's hand like she was a charity project. "And Junie needs stability." Gordon nodded like he was approving a business proposal. "You can stay in your old room. Just until you get back on your feet." Temporary. That word again. It always sounds kind at the start. I moved in with 2 duffel bags, Junie's clothes in a plastic bin, and a promise to myself that I wouldn't be a burden. I offered money when I could. I cleaned up constantly. I kept Junie quiet. I tried to make us small. At first, it was tolerable. Junie slept in the bed I'd slept in as a kid, the walls still a pale blue Marla had never bothered to repaint because she liked the feeling of things staying the way she wanted. I worked, came home, cooked simple dinners, helped Junie with sight words, then collapsed. And then the comments started. They weren't obvious. They weren't the kind of things you could quote to someone and get sympathy. They were the kind of small cuts that look harmless unless you're the one bleeding. "You're always exhausted," Marla would say, her voice light like she was giving me helpful advice. "Maybe you should organize your life better." Gordon would step over a toy Junie forgot to pick up and sigh loudly. "We're just trying to keep the place nice." Marla's favorite was the smile she used when she was about to make something sound reasonable. "It's not healthy for Junie to see you so stressed," she'd say, as if the stress was my personality flaw and not my circumstances. I started doubting myself in weird ways. I'd stand in the bathroom at 2 a.m., brushing my teeth after a double shift, and stare at my own face like I was trying to find proof that I was failing. Maybe I was too disorganized. Maybe I was too emotional. Maybe I should be grateful for anything. That's how Marla worked. She didn't yell. She rewrote reality. One night after I came home late with my feet aching and my brain half dead, Marla sat at the kitchen table like she was about to deliver a diagnosis. "We need to talk," she said. Gordon stayed in the living room, the TV low like he wanted to be nearby for support, but far enough to pretend he wasn't part of it. Marla folded her hands. "We think it's time you became independent." I knew that tone. It was the tone she used when she'd already decided and wanted me to believe I'd agreed. "I'm trying," I said, keeping my voice flat. "You've been here long enough," she continued, her smile soft and sharp at the same time. "You're a father now. You have to figure it out." Gordon finally chimed in from the couch. 30 days, he called like he was offering a generous contract. "That's reasonable. We're not monsters." I didn't argue. Arguing in that apartment never led to anything good. If I raised my voice, I'd become the unstable one. If I showed emotion, I'd prove Marla's point. So I nodded. Okay. And I tried. I searched listings on my phone in the break room at St. Bridget, thumb-scrolling while I inhaled cafeteria coffee that tasted like burnt paper. I called places on my lunch break. I emailed landlords between call lights and patient transfers. Every conversation ended the same way. First and last month. Deposit, credit check, proof of income. Sorry, we chose another applicant. Each no felt like another inch off the cliff. Junie stayed quiet in those weeks, like she could sense the tension under my skin. She'd draw pictures at the kitchen table and slide them toward me like peace offerings. When Marla saw the mess of crayons, she'd smile too wide and say, "We're not running a daycare here." Junie would gather her things in silence. I would swallow my anger and tell myself it didn't matter. Temporary. Just get through it. Then came the night they decided 30 days was a suggestion. It was after a late shift. I'd helped a confused patient back into bed 3 times, cleaned up a tray someone knocked over, and held a woman's hand while she cried because she was terrified of surgery in the morning. I got off after midnight, drove home on autopilot, and parked in the lot outside my parents' building. The hallway light was on. Something in my gut tightened immediately. 2 cardboard boxes sat outside the door. My boxes. At first, my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. It tried to label it as something else, a mistake, a prank, someone else's stuff. I stepped closer. My name was written on the side in Marla's neat handwriting. I grabbed the doorknob and tried it. Locked. I knocked once, then again harder. Silence. I knocked a 3rd time, the sound echoing down the hall like it was announcing my humiliation. Finally, the door cracked open. Marla's face appeared calm, composed, as if this was a normal Tuesday. "You need to keep your voice down," she whispered sharply. "Neighbors. Why are my things outside?" My voice came out rougher than I meant. Gordon's voice floated from inside, bored. "We told you, Lysander. Independence." "It hasn't been 30 days, I said, and I hated how my voice shook. Marla's expression hardened just slightly. "Plans change." I glanced past her shoulder into the entryway. Junie was curled up on the floor by the shoe rack, her little jacket folded under her head like a pillow. Shoes still on. Like they'd placed her there hours ago so I could scoop her up and disappear without waking up the whole apartment. My chest went cold. "Where are we supposed to go?" I hissed. Marla's smile returned, thin and satisfied. "You'll figure it out," she said, like she was praising my resilience while pushing my face into the ground. "You always do." Then she added almost gently, "Don't make a scene." I stood there with my boxes in the hallway, the light buzzing overhead, the air too warm and too dry. I stepped inside just long enough to crouch and slide my arms under Junie. She made a tiny sleepy sound and wrapped her arms around my neck, automatically trusting me without question. Marla's hand was already on the door. As I backed out into the hall, Junie mumbled against my shoulder. "Daddy, it's okay," I lied. "We're having a sleepover." The door shut with a soft click. That click was louder than any yelling. I shoved the boxes into my car and drove without knowing where I was going. Street lights blurred. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Junie slept across the back seat, her small body curled like a question mark. I don't remember most of that night. I remember sitting in a parking lot somewhere with the engine off, listening to the ticking sound it makes when it cools down. I remember thinking, how did this happen over and over until my brain felt bruised? The next day I tried to fix it because fixing things was my skill set. That's what I did at work. That's what I did in life. I called Marla. No answer. I called Gordon. He picked up once, voice flat. "We're doing this because we love you," he said like he was reading from a script. Tough love. Then he hung up. I went to work anyway because bills don't pause for grief. I smiled at patients. I made jokes. I helped people stand up when their legs wouldn't cooperate. Then I went back out to my car and watched my own life unravel in the rearview mirror. We stayed in a motel for one night, then a second, the kind of place that smells like stale smoke even when it claims to be non-smoking. Junie thought the ice machine was exciting. I smiled and pretended that was the point. On day 3, the money ran out. I slept in the car with Junie in the back seat, my coat pulled over her like a blanket, my eyes open all night because I didn't trust the world. In the morning, I washed up in a gas station bathroom, splashed water on my face, and tried to make myself look like the kind of parent who wasn't falling apart. Junie went to school quiet. A counselor noticed. A kind woman with careful eyes who didn't ask in a way that let me dodge. "Everything okay at home?" she said. I lied. Of course I lied. That was what survival looked like. But then she asked again later, softer. "Lysander, are you safe? Is Junie safe?" I looked at my daughter in that moment, the way she watched me wide-eyed, learning from me how to perform normal. And something in me snapped. I told the truth. 2 days later, I was filling out intake forms at St. Eloin Family Shelter while Junie swung her legs on a plastic chair. The intake worker was kind but tired, like she'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. "We need your information," she said. "We need to know where you stayed last night." "In my car," I said. She nodded, writing it down like it was just another box. Junie leaned toward me and whispered too loudly, "Is this our house now?" The worker flinched. I smiled too hard. "No," I said quickly. "No, sweetheart." I wanted to add it's temporary, but the word tasted like a joke. That night, Junie fell asleep on a narrow bed beside me in a room that smelled like bleach and overcooked food. I lay awake listening to the sounds of other families behind thin walls, coughing babies, crying, someone whispering, "It's okay," over and over like a prayer. My phone sat heavy in my hand. I thought about calling Cecilia. I thought about the way she looked at me when I was a kid, like she could see what I would become before I did. I thought about the way Marla always talked about her like Cecilia was a force of nature. You didn't bother unless the house was on fire. "Your grandmother hates drama," Marla used to say. "Don't embarrass yourself. She doesn't like weakness." I stared at my phone until my eyes hurt. Then, like she could sense the thought through the air, Marla texted me. It came fast, too fast, like she'd been waiting for it. "Don't bother Cecilia. She's overseas. She's busy. Don't drag her into this." I read it 3 times, feeling my pride flare like a stupid little shield. I didn't want to look pathetic. I didn't want to be the grown man calling his wealthy grandmother from a shelter like a child asking to be rescued. So I didn't call. I told myself I'd handle it. I told myself Junie and I would climb out on our own. And in doing that, I gave Marla what she wanted most. Time. When Cecilia pulled into the Palmetto Diner parking lot, I realized I'd been holding my breath for the entire ride. The diner looked like a postcard version of comfort warm windows, a bell on the door, the smell of syrup and coffee drifting out every time someone walked in. Inside, the heater hit my face so hard I almost cried from the shock of being warm. We slid into a booth by the window. Junie immediately grabbed the kids' menu and started coloring like her life depended on it. Cecilia ordered her hot chocolate without asking, and Junie's eyes lit up in that grateful way kids have when someone does something small that feels big. I watched it and felt something sharp twist in my chest. It was that easy. Kindness was that easy. My parents had chosen every other option. Cecilia didn't fill the space with questions. She didn't ask me to explain my feelings. She didn't try to soothe me with soft words. She watched. The way she sat was calm, but it wasn't relaxed. It was the calm of someone lining up pieces on a board. "Grandma," I started because my mind was still stuck on one thing. What house? She didn't answer my question in the order my panic demanded. "I'm going to make a call," she said. "You're going to listen and you're not going to interrupt." I nodded. It wasn't a respectful nod. It was the nod you give when you're strapped to an operating table and the surgeon tells you not to move. Junie hummed under her breath while she colored, making the pancake on the page a ridiculous shade of purple. She glanced up once, saw my face, and then went back to coloring harder, like she could scribble stability into existence. Cecilia tapped her phone. 1 ring. 2. Then Marla's voice came through, bright and sweet, like she was stepping into a role she'd played her whole life. Cecilia. Oh my goodness, what a surprise. How are you? Cecilia's tone stayed polite, almost gentle. I was thinking about Lysander, she said. How is he doing? There was a pause. Just a sliver of silence. It was so small most people wouldn't notice it. But I noticed. I noticed because I had lived my whole life inside Marla's pauses, those moments where she decided which version of reality served her best. Then Marla answered, smooth as glass. Oh, he's doing great, she said. He's living in the house. He's settled. He loves it. You know, Lysander, he wanted space, so we didn't bother you. My hands went cold on the table edge. I stared at the sticky laminate like it might open up and swallow me whole. My throat tightened until swallowing felt impossible. Junie didn't understand the words, not really, but she understood tone. She looked up again, eyes narrowing in that careful way kids get when they sense danger without knowing what shape it is. Marla kept talking, filling the air with cheerful nonsense. How busy she'd been, how proud she was, how family meant everything, how she and Gordon were just trying to support me the best they could. Cecilia let her. That was the part that frightened me most. Cecilia didn't rush liars, she gave them room. She gave them enough rope to show everyone exactly what they were holding. When Marla finally paused for breath, Cecilia said, "That's good to hear." And then she ended the call. Just like that. No accusation, no confrontation, no raised voice, no dramatic reveal, just a quiet click. I let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't come out so broken. So she knew I said the words, tasting bitter. She knew the whole time. Cecilia's gaze stayed on mine, steady and sharp. She knew enough to lie without thinking, she said. That tells me what I need to know. Junie slid her coloring page toward me like an offering. Daddy, look, she said carefully. I made it purple. I forced a smile so fast it probably looked painful. Wow, I said. That pancake is very brave. Junie giggled, and for half a second my chest loosened. Then Cecilia leaned forward, slightly lowering her voice so Junie couldn't catch every word. I arranged a house for you, she said. On Hawthorne Street. My brain stuttered. You... What a house, she repeated like she was stating something as simple as the weather. For you and Junie. Your parents were supposed to handle the handoff, keys, move-in, all of it. They told me it was done. I sat there frozen, trying to fit that sentence into my life. A house. For us. Sitting somewhere in Charleston while my daughter slept next to me in a shelter bed that squeaked every time she breathed. My fingers curled around the edge of the booth until my knuckles went white. Why wouldn't you tell me directly, I asked before I could stop myself. The question came out raw, and the second it left my mouth, guilt hit me because she was the first person who had shown up. Cecilia didn't flinch. Because I trusted your parents, she said. That was my mistake, not yours. She stood, walked a few steps away like she was giving my shame space to exist without an audience, and made 2 quick calls. Her voice stayed low, clipped, efficient. I caught fragments. Hawthorne file to key log, listing history or payout instructions. Yes, today. Then she returned to the booth and sat down like someone settling into a decision. You're not going back to that shelter, she said. My pride tried to rise up and argue. My exhaustion crushed it. Okay, I whispered, and it was the most honest word I'd said all morning. Cecilia's phone buzzed again. She checked it, and something in her eyes turned even colder. Junie was still coloring, humming softly, living in her small, safe moment inside a diner booth. I watched my daughter and felt a fierce, clean kind of anger settle into my bones. Anger that wasn't loud but solid. The kind that doesn't explode. The kind that builds. Because whatever my parents had done, it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the fact that somebody had taken a home meant for my child and turned it into something else. And Cecilia Von Carrick wasn't the type of woman who let people keep what they stole. That night I didn't turn all the lights off. I told Poppy everything was okay, the same way parents always do when they're trying to keep the ground from shaking. I reminded her to brush her teeth. I laid out her clothes for the morning. I kissed her forehead and stayed in her doorway until her breathing slowed into sleep. Only then did I let myself close her door gently, like the sound itself mattered. The apartment settled into its usual nighttime quiet, but I didn't trust it. Silence felt like camouflage. I left the kitchen light on the hallway light too, and sat back down at the table with both laptops open. On one screen, my encrypted vault glowed softly as I reviewed the timeline Jules and I had built. Every event was there, stacked in order, stripped of emotion, timestamps, alerts, freezes, calls. It looked neat. Too neat for how it felt to live inside it. On the other screen, I isolated my email in a sandboxed environment. No shortcuts, no assumptions. I was done treating my own safety casually. I kept my ears tuned for any sound from Poppy's room while my mind stayed locked in what I could only think of as protection mode. Not panic, not rage. The quiet focus that comes when something precious is suddenly fragile. That's when the email arrived. No name. No recognizable domain. A disposable address designed to exist just long enough to deliver a message. The subject line wasn't clever. It didn't need to be. Stop digging. The body was even shorter. This is family business. Handle it in the family. If you keep going, secrets will come out. Below the text sat a single link. I didn't touch it. I hovered, checked the raw headers, followed the domain trail without clicking. The URL hopped through a couple of redirects, each one trying to mask the origin just enough to feel anonymous without being truly careful. Whoever sent it wasn't a professional ghost. They were confident I'd be scared enough not to look closely. I opened the link in a controlled environment, my pulse steady but heavy. The page loaded into something I recognized instantly. A public forum. Not the dark web. Not hidden. Just a place that lived in the gray space between hustle and theft. Threads about easy returns, low-risk flips, investment tricks that only ever worked for the people selling them. And there it was. A thread near the top. My name. Not a username that resembled mine. Not a hint. My actual name. For a second I thought my eyes were lying to me. I leaned closer, reread it, and felt something inside my chest go cold and hollow at the same time. Inside the thread were screenshots. My LinkedIn profile cropped just enough to make it look official. My job title. The company site linked cleanly like an endorsement. A photo pulled from a school tech fair months ago trimmed down so it showed my face and Poppy's shoulder, her name half visible on a badge I hadn't even noticed in the original picture. They hadn't hacked me to get this. They'd just taken it. Public pieces rearranged into a threat. I scrolled slowly, forcing myself not to rush. Panic makes mistakes, and mistakes leave gaps. The original post framed me as a problem. Someone who had frozen funds. Someone who needed to be motivated to cooperate. The language was casual, almost playful, like they were talking about fixing a broken machine instead of pressuring a father. Then I reached the comments. My hands went numb. People joked about strategies the way sports fans talk about plays. One line suggested leaning on family guilt. Another talked about making it uncomfortable. And then I saw it written with a kind of lazy cruelty that made my stomach drop. If he won't move, scare him. Kids make great leverage. I stared at the words until they blurred. This wasn't a private threat whispered over a phone line. This was a crowd. A group of strangers brainstorming ways to push me into compliance, turning my life into a case study. I felt the cold creep up my arms, the kind that doesn't feel like fear at first, just absence. Like warmth leaving your body. I kept scrolling because stopping wouldn't undo what I'd already seen. That's when I noticed the handle of the person who started the thread. It wasn't a name I knew from my own circles, but it rang anyway. A faint echo from old conversations. From Rhett bragging late at night, beer in hand, talking about a guy who could sell anything, who knew how to pull people into deals and keep them hooked. Troy Rell. Seeing that name there was like finally spotting the shape of something you've been bumping into in the dark. Rhett wasn't acting alone. He was a piece on a board I hadn't known existed. And if Troy Rell was involved, this wasn't a one-off theft fueled by bad decisions. It was part of a system that used people until they broke. I didn't let myself sit with the fear. I turned it into work. I captured everything, the full thread, every comment, every username, timestamps, links to images. I documented the context, labeled it clearly, and dropped it into the vault with notes that didn't soften the truth. Public exposure implied threats, references to a child. Then I messaged Jules. They posted my info. Mine and Poppy's. There are comments about targeting kids. The reply came back almost instantly. Okay, that changes the lane. A few minutes later, Jules followed up with something that made my decision settle into place. I have a contact at the State Financial Crimes Unit. If you're ready, I can loop them in. I didn't hesitate. I had heard Rhett's voice crack on the phone. I had seen strangers type my daughter into a strategy discussion. I understood the rules now. If I tried to handle this quietly, privately, I was playing on their field. I typed back, "Do it." I was saving the last screenshot when my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time it wasn't subtle. "You really think strangers are going to save you?" I didn't reply. I looked down the hallway toward Poppy's room. The door closed, her small life temporarily safe behind it, and felt something inside me lock into place. Tomorrow, this stopped being something I managed alone. And if Rhett called again, I wasn't going to just listen. I was going to guide him. The next morning, I moved like every decision mattered more than it used to. I got Poppy ready for school early, double-checked drop-off plans, made sure she'd be with adults I trusted. I didn't post anything online. I didn't check social feeds. I didn't give the world even a hint of our routine. Once she was safely out the door, I laid everything out on the table. The timeline, device logs, screenshots of the thread, the anonymous email, a written transcript of Rhett's call word for word as close as memory and notes could make it. I labeled the folder the way professionals do when they want to be taken seriously. Victim packet. Jules set up the call. Detective Maren Holt appeared on my screen from a small office with file boxes stacked behind her. No drama, no raised eyebrows, just focus. She listened without interrupting as I walked her through it all from the first alert to the forum thread. When I finished, she leaned back slightly and nodded once. "This isn't a family dispute," she said. "This is identity-related fraud, wire fraud indicators, and intimidation tied to doxing." Hearing it framed that way steadied me. It gave the chaos edges. Holt gave clear instructions. Preserve everything. Don't respond to threats. Don't confront Rhett without coordination. If he reaches out again, tell us immediately. We can use that, she said. If he talks. As we talked through the evidence, something else came up. Holt confirmed what I already suspected. The bank's trusted device and authorized user structure had made this easier than it should have been. Under the right escalation, some transfers might be recoverable. But that also meant pressure on Rhett was increasing. "He's going to feel the squeeze," Holt said. "And squeezed people make mistakes." Then she asked a question that landed heavier than I expected. "Are you certain your identity wasn't used to convince other people to hand over money?" I thought of my LinkedIn profile sitting in that thread. Of the word payout. Of the way Rhett talked about them like a group waiting on returns. "I'm not certain," I admitted, "but I'm starting to believe it." Holt nodded. "We'll look." That afternoon, before I could fully absorb the shape of what was forming, I got a message from someone I didn't recognize. "My name is Gideon Pike. I used to work with Rhett. I'm not reaching out to hurt you. I'm reaching out because this is going to get worse." Holt's advice was immediate. "Don't meet alone. Public place. Clear exits. Let us know where and when." I agreed under those conditions. We met near a community center parking lot in the late afternoon, the kind of place where people came and went without paying attention. I kept Poppy well away, locked safely in the car with instructions I'd never wanted to give a child. Gideon looked tired, not dangerous, just worn down, like someone who'd been holding a lie too long. He didn't waste time. Rhett and Veda were tied into a group that lived on forums like the one I'd seen. When I froze the accounts, I hadn't just stopped my money from moving. I'd stalled a chain, and people on the other end were angry. When people panic, Gideon said quietly, "They do stupid things." He told me he was trying to get out, that he had a kid on the way, that he didn't want his future tied to that world. I didn't trust him, but I understood leverage when I saw it. When I reported back to Holt, her response was measured but intent. "If he's willing to talk," she said, "we can build something solid, but it has to be clean." That night, as Poppy drew a long bridge labeled before on one side and after on the other, I realized she was already mapping the same crossing I was. And I knew Rhett would call again. Next time I wouldn't just answer. I'd be ready. Detective Maren Holt didn't sell the plan like a movie. She sold it like a case. When we got back on video the night after Gideon reached out, Holt was blunt about the goal. Not revenge, not satisfaction, not a brother getting what he deserved. She wanted a clean sequence of admissions and corroborating evidence so nobody could dismiss this as a messy family feud. "Your brother needs to say it," Holt told me. "He needs to say he moved the money, that it wasn't his, that he tried to pressure you into undoing the freeze, and that he referenced other people behind him. If he does that, this becomes what it is. A crime with a paper trail." I understood my role immediately, and I hated it. I would be the bait. I would have to sound scared in a way Rhett recognized, soft in a way he expected. The older brother who used to patch his holes before anyone saw them. Holt gave me rules that weren't negotiable. Don't improvise. Don't move the meeting spot. Don't get pulled toward a car, an alley, a quieter corner. Don't let pride or anger start a conversation Holt hadn't planned. Stay disciplined. Let him talk. I sat at my kitchen table with the lights still on the same table where my accounts had vanished and practiced lines that made my stomach turn. Poppy was in her room drawing. Every now and then I heard the faint scratch of her pencil through the door like a heartbeat keeping time. The next morning I arranged Poppy's safety like it was an operation with no margin for error. Jules took her to a co-working space where a couple of trusted adults would be around, a place with cameras, controlled access, and no reason for my daughter to be anywhere near what was coming. I told Poppy it was a special day with Jules pizza and the kind of kid-friendly coding stuff she loved. I didn't tell her what I was doing. I couldn't put that weight on her, not even accidentally. Before Jules left, Poppy hugged me hard and whispered, "Be careful." "I will," I said, and meant it with a seriousness that scared me. Then I waited until Holt confirmed their system was ready, recording surveillance and a team in place. Only then did I call Rhett. He answered on the second ring, voice sharp with exhaustion and suspicion. What I forced my voice to crack in the right places. Not theatrical, not too perfect, just enough to sound like I hadn't slept. "You were right," I said. "This is bigger than I thought." A brief silence on the line, and I could almost hear him recalculating. "What did I tell you?" he said finally, and his tone shifted into something smug and relieved, like he'd been waiting to hear me surrender. "I got more messages," I said, letting my breath catch. "I haven't been sleeping. I keep thinking about her." He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what the messages said. He didn't say anything about what he'd done. He just went straight to the one thing he cared about. "Then fix it," Rhett snapped. "Call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake." "I talked to them," I said. "They said there might be a way to clean it up if we do it right, like it was a misunderstanding." "You can do that." His voice sharpened, hope and desperation braided together. "If you meet me," I said, "if you sign what they need. We tell a tidy story. Clerical error, confusion, something they can file away." He breathed out fast. "You better not be setting me up." "I'm trying to keep my kids safe," I said, "and let that sit there. I'm trying to stop this before it gets worse." He didn't respond to the kid part. He responded to the pressure part. "You already made it worse," he said. "You made me late. You made people angry." Who, I asked carefully. "Red, if I'm going to do this, I need to know what I'm fixing. I need to know who I'm fixing it for." A beat of silence. Then sharper. "Don't ask questions. Then give me one reason I should trust you, I said, and my throat tightened on purpose. Because I don't. Not right now. He laughed once brittle. Trust me, you don't have to trust me. You just have to do what I said. The line went quiet again, and I could feel him deciding whether to take the meeting. He needed the money. He needed the pipeline unclogged. He didn't need my forgiveness. I offered the location the way Holt told me to, public open crowded cameras everywhere. Stone Arch Bridge, I said. Middle of the day, people everywhere. No cars, no motel, no back rooms. You're scared of me, he said, and it sounded like he enjoyed it. I'm scared of what you dragged into my life, I corrected. Noon, tomorrow. He hesitated, then agreed with conditions that were really threats. Fine, he said. But don't try anything stupid. You're not the only one who can make calls. When the call ended, Holt's voice came through the secure line, steady as a metronome. Good. He's coming. The next day arrived with the kind of clear Minnesota daylight that makes everything look clean, even when it isn't. The river moved under the bridge like nothing in the world had changed. Joggers passed, couples walked dogs, tourists stopped to take photos. Life loud and ordinary, flowing around what was about to happen. Under my sweatshirt, a small recording device sat warm against my ribs, taped in place with instructions Holt had drilled into me. Don't touch it. Don't adjust it. Don't fiddle. Let it work. Gideon was already in position half a block away, pretending to scroll his phone, an earpiece tucked under a cap. His job was to watch for extra people for help for anyone who looked like they weren't there to enjoy the view. Holt's team was scattered in plain sight, people who looked like they belonged in the park. A man with a coffee, a woman with a stroller. Two people standing too still near a railing. The kind of quiet presence you'd never notice unless you knew to look. I chose a spot with camera coverage and foot traffic. A place where a scream would draw attention. A place where running would be hard. I waited, hands in my pockets, forcing my breathing into something even. Then Red appeared. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not because he'd physically shrunk, but because the version of him in my head had always been inflated, always the kid brother who could talk his way out of anything, who could charm people into giving him one more chance. Now he looked like a man who'd slept in bad beds and lived off adrenaline. His hoodie hung looser than it should. His eyes didn't settle. They jumped from face to face, scanning like he was expecting a hit. He stopped a few feet from me and didn't bother with hello. You look like hell, he said. So do you, I replied, and then I forced myself back into Holt's script. We need to do this clean. He glanced around. Where's the paperwork? I held up a folder. Bank letters, forms, enough official-looking weight to sell the story if anyone watched from a distance. Right here. But first I need you to say it. He rolled his eyes. Say what? Why you did it, I said. Out loud. He snorted. You want a confession? I want the truth, I said, and my voice stayed low. Because I'm about to ask the bank to believe a lie. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw something flicker behind the anger, resentment that had been fermenting for years. Because I was tired, he hissed. Tired of scraping. Tired of being the screw-up while you play hero with your nice job and your perfect kid. My kid isn't a trophy, I said, keeping my tone controlled. She's a person you targeted. I didn't target her, he snapped. I took what was there. That was hers, I said. And you know it. He leaned closer, lowering his voice like the crowd couldn't hear us anyway. You left the door open, Keaton. You left me in your system. I walked through it, and you planned to lock me out after I said. You tried changing settings. You tried adding recovery info. Why? His eyes narrowed. Because you would have done exactly what you're doing now. You always think you can fix everything. I kept him talking like Holt wanted. Where were you going to go? He gave a short, humorless laugh. Somewhere you couldn't find me. And Veda, I asked, letting the name land. She with you. His shoulders tensed just a fraction. Don't bring her into this. You already did, I said. You vanished with her. You vanished with my money. He ran a hand over his mouth, and I saw the edge of fear again. Not fear of me. Fear of the situation. Fear of the invisible pressure squeezing him from the inside. I told you I'd pay it back, he said. With what I asked. Because all I'm seeing is you moving it into payout channels and investment labels. His eyes flashed. You've been digging. I've been surviving, I said again. So tell me, if I help you undo this, who am I undoing it for? He hesitated, and then his need to dominate the conversation overruled his caution. It's a system, he said, almost spitting the word. It's how you make money fast. People want returns, they get returns. You don't ask where it comes from. And you used my name, I said quietly. My job. My credibility. His lips curled. It helps. People trust you. People hear cybersecurity and they think it means safe. My stomach turned, but I kept my face steady. So you used me as cover while you ran deals. He shrugged like it was obvious. It worked. Behind him, Gideon shifted slightly. A subtle movement, but I saw it. He was watching something. Then I heard a voice cut through the air, tight and shaking. You didn't tell me there was a kid. Rhett and I both turned. Veda stood a few steps away, arms folded tight like she was holding herself together. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a way that looked more like survival than style. She didn't look like someone who'd just shown up for a stroll. She looked like someone who'd driven on panic and regret. Rhett's face twisted. What are you doing here, watching you lie? She shot back. Watching you pretend you're in control. He stepped toward her, voice low and dangerous. Shut up. Veda ignored him and looked at me instead. They've been talking about your daughter, she said, and the words hit me like ice water. On the threads, in the chats, they said kids make people move faster. My pulse roared in my ears. Rhett's head snapped back toward her. Stop. You told me this was just taking from your brother, she said, voice cracking. You didn't tell me you were dragging a kid into it. He reached for her arm, fingers digging in, and something in me went very still. In my ear, Holt's voice came through, calm and certain. We have enough. Step back. I took one step away from Rhett, then another. Rhett's eyes darted, seeing the movement, sensing the shift. He started scanning the crowd again, faster now, looking for exits. I held my breath and thought of Poppy at the co-working space, drawing her bridge between before and after. I refused to let her pay for my old softness. The intervention happened so quickly it didn't feel real at first. Plainclothes officers moved in from different angles, badges, flashing, voices clear and controlled. Holt stepped in herself, authoritative without shouting, like she'd done this enough times to know chaos feeds on noise. Rhett Miller, she said, you're being detained. Hands where we can see them. Rhett reacted on instinct. He backed up, eyes wide, and for a split second I thought he might swing. Then he tried to bolt. He made it maybe 3 steps before someone caught him. He fought like a man who'd always believed consequences were for other people. When they turned him and forced his arms behind his back, the sound that came out of him wasn't an apology. It was a raw, furious yell. Pure disbelief turned into noise. You set me up, he screamed, voice echoing off the bridge. You did this. Holt didn't flinch. Officers secured him with practiced efficiency. I watched his face as the cuffs clicked closed, and I felt something in me detach, not with cruelty, but with finality. The brother I remembered, whatever pieces of him were still alive in my mind, faded under the weight of what he'd chosen. As they held him, he tried to throw one last story at the crowd like a smoke bomb. You brought cops on your own family, he shouted at me. You really did this to your own blood. I looked him in the eye and kept my voice low enough that it was only for him. No, I said. You did this to yourself. I just stopped you from doing worse. For a moment his expression faltered. Not remorse, not understanding. Just the shock of hearing someone refuse to carry his blame. Veda was separated from him immediately, guided a few yards away. She looked terrified, but also relieved, like she'd been waiting for someone else to take control of the crash. Holt spoke to her with a different tone, still firm but less combative. The kind of tone you use when you know a person is standing at the edge of a decision. Veda glanced at Rhett, then away, like looking at him was painful. I realized then she wasn't just a passenger. She knew channels, names, patterns. She could confirm what I'd seen and heard, and she looked like someone who wanted out. The days that followed didn't feel like victory. They felt like work. I handed Holt my encrypted vault. I signed statements. I confirmed timelines the night the money moved, the freeze, the call, the threats, the email, the forum thread, the daylight meeting. Gideon provided names of chats and the way the pipeline operated. Drop accounts, mule transfers, people hiding behind handles. A network that relied on fear and speed. Holt told me plainly I wasn't the only one. There were other victims. People who'd believed investment opportunities sold with confidence and urgency. Retirees. Single parents. Anyone hungry for a shortcut and tired of being left behind. Then came the second wound. In the early stages of the case, Holt showed me evidence they pulled from Rhett's communications. Messages where he used my career as a stamp of legitimacy. My brother's in cybersecurity. He knows how to keep things secure. He works incident response. He's the real deal. He'd used my name as a trust anchor to pull other people into the same churn he'd fed with my money. That hit deeper than the drained accounts. Because it wasn't just theft from me. It was him borrowing my identity to harm strangers. Rhett eventually took a deal to avoid a long trial. The charges were not framed as a family conflict. They were framed as what they were: fraud tied to identity misuse, coordinated transfers, intimidation. The doxing thread didn't help him. Neither did the phone call where he'd said too much. In court, he didn't look at me. He didn't offer a clean apology. He held on to silence like it was the last thing he could control. I learned a hard truth there. Some people will never give the apology that would make the pain feel neat. They'd rather protect their ego than repair what they broke. The bank, under pressure and scrutiny, admitted their system had made it easier than it should have been. Trusted device and authorized access had created a vulnerability, and while it didn't excuse Rhett, it mattered to my recovery. They agreed to reimburse part of the loss through internal processes. Funds seized from the network were distributed in pieces to victims, including me. It meant Poppy and I didn't have to pack our lives into boxes. But when the money came back, the feeling didn't. Because betrayal isn't a number you can deposit again. When things finally quieted, I rebuilt my life the way I rebuild compromised systems. Credit freezes, new authentication, two-factor everywhere. Devices cleared, accounts audited, every old exception removed, every just this once closed down. One night I sat at the kitchen table with Poppy and told her the truth in a way a 10-year-old could carry. "You hit the red button at the right time," I said. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." She nodded, serious. "So, boundaries aren't mean." "No," I said. "Boundaries are guardrails. They keep people from driving off the edge, including us." She went to her room and came back with her sketchbook. She flipped to the last pages. She had drawn our team the way she saw it: me with a laptop shaped like a shield, Jules with a stack of files, Holt with a badge like a spotlight, Gideon standing off to the side holding a phone like evidence, and behind bars made of ones and zeros a small figure sat with his head in his hands. Underneath, in big careful letters, she wrote, "Boundaries are guardrails." I stared at it and felt something warm and painful in my chest at the same time. Later, when the apartment was quiet and Poppy was asleep, I scrolled through old photos of Rhett. The two of us as kids in thrift store clothes, laughing like the world was simple. Rhett holding baby Poppy with a look of terrified pride. A blurry Thanksgiving where he'd washed dishes without being asked. I didn't delete them. Pretending the good moments never existed wouldn't make the bad ones less real. It wouldn't protect Poppy from the truth that people can be both loving once harmful later. So I made 2 albums on my phone. Before. After. Before held the version of my brother I'd loved and defended and believed in. After held everything that followed: case numbers, paperwork, screenshots, the fundraiser plans Poppy never needed but insisted on anyway, her comics, our new routines, the safety rails we built together. The line between them wasn't clean. It never is. But it was honest. And the truth I carried forward was simple, the kind of truth I wanted my daughter to grow up with in her bones. Love without boundaries isn't protection. It's exposure. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't to forgive endlessly. It's to say, "This is where my story changes, even if yours doesn't." and to lock the door even when the person outside shares your last name. Some endings don't come with a clean apology or a perfect sentence that makes everything make sense. Sometimes all we get is the quiet work afterward. Rebuilding trust, rebuilding safety, and learning that love without boundaries can turn into an open door. If this story left anything with us, it's that we can hold compassion for who someone used to be while still protecting the life we're responsible for now. No cheering, no blame parade, just the hard human choice to step out of the cycle and choose something steadier. And maybe that's the part that matters most. When family breaks something in us, we don't have to become cold to become safe. We can stay kind, stay soft in the right places, and still draw a line that keeps the people we love from getting hurt again. If you've ever had to set a boundary that changed everything and you feel like sharing, you can leave a few lines in the comments where you're watching from, or what you wished you'd said sooner. And if you want to be part of a space where we listen, reflect, and keep telling stories that feel real, subscribe and stay with us. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one.